As always, this show is brought to you by Mass Monopoly. We're an adventure sports agency focused on fueling the brands that fuel us. Everyone here is an adventure athlete of some sort and is active in some or all of the sports that we support. We help build adventure brands through authentic, value-based marketing, growing the business without selling your soul. Go to massmonopoly.com for a free consultation. We're also brought to you by 508 Adventure Sports. 508 is a family-run business who want to keep adventure sports affordable for families. They manufacture and sell handcrafted hard goods like skateboards, mud guards, and more. They also source affordable, quality accessories for the sports they love, like mountain biking gloves, skateboarding pads, helmets, hiking equipment, and all kinds of stuff to keep you and your family out on adventures through all four seasons without breaking the bank. Check them out at 508.com. Five, the letter O, the number 8.com. Today I got to talk to Joe McEwan, founder, designer, and fabricator at Starling Cycles. Joe has a lot of unique and interesting ideas, strong opinions, and an obvious passion for the sport and for his craft. Those are all things that make for a great conversation. I had so much fun with this one that I'm already eager for our next one. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe McEwan. And here we go. So I'm excited for you to be able to join today. We finally connected. I'm excited to talk to you today. I like the fact that you build things, you build them with your own hands. That interests me. I don't personally know how to work with metal, but I build skateboards and things out of wood with my kids.
I didn't know how to work with metal until I started, but
oh yeah, and going back and forth to get this going. Our emails. It seems like you're a guy with strong opinions and a lot of passion for what you're doing. So I think it's going to be fun today to talk about how Starling came to be and why it is you do what you do. So. How did that happen? How did Starling come to be a company?
I suppose I've always kind of made things. I used to play golf. I used to sort of hack together some golf clubs. I used to skateboard when I was a kid, and I used to make skateboards. Not very well, but I used to make skateboards to go on. So I've always kind of made things. That's what I do. And then I ended up with a career in engineering. So I was an aerospace engineer for nearly 20 years, from sort of end of university until I've just given up. And then I played golf until I was mid-20s, and then I realised I was getting a bit fat and unfit, so I started riding bikes instead. It was a bit more exciting. And then from riding bikes... Sorry, go on.
I said, yeah, it's more exciting for sure. I used to golf too, and I don't find it very fun anymore.
No, you've got to put a lot of time into golf. That's the trouble, isn't it? If you don't put a lot of time in, you end up rubbish. So yeah, I haven't got that time.
I can tell you, I was honestly never more than rubbish. I was never good at it. I just went out there for the time outdoors, and then I found more things I like to do outdoors that are more exciting than golf. So things like mountain biking and snowboarding and other things.
Yeah. No snowboarding here, but lots of mountain biking. I started mountain biking, got more and more into it, and then got to the point where I decided I've always made things in the past. I'll go and do a frame building course, and there's quite a few small scale builders in the UK who offer frame building courses. So I went on a course with a chap called Dave Yates, he was a famous frame builder in the 80s and 90s, and he sort of moved into giving people courses. So went and stayed with him for a week with someone else, and we built a frame each. I built a single-speed hardtail because I thought that'd be simple and that'd be good fun, and then took that home. And Dave Yates was a bit old school, so he convinced me I needed a 71-degree head angle on my hardtail. And I was never convinced, but he convinced me. And then I got it back home, built it up, and rode it, and it was too steep a head angle, obviously. So I kind of thought, let's do something about this. And I just moved into a new house, and the new house at the bottom of the garden has got it was an office for the people who lived here before, and I've kind of converted it into a workshop. And I just thought, right, let's make it something interesting to do, to put the proper head angle on this bike. So I constructed a jig out of wood. I got some small bottles of oxyacetylene and just did it. Just chopped the head tube off, put a new head tube on. So I'd made a bike on a course, and now I'd done my first kind of modification at home. I'd made my first bit of bike at home.
Yeah, nice.
And then everything really just kind of continued from there. Once I'd made one, or I'd made one little mod, the second bike I made, I chopped up an old hardtail I had and made it into a bike for my daughter, and she rode around on it, and that's good. And then somebody gave me an old Cannondale Prophet swing arm, and I made a new front triangle for that. And then it just progressed really. I sort of, I'd spend my evenings in my sheds building bits of bikes.
So it kind of became something you just enjoyed doing in your spare time at first and got more and more into it?
So yeah, it's a hobby. It was always a hobby. I was never planning for it to be more than a hobby. It was just, I've always liked making things, making bikes. I rode bikes. Let's make bikes. But the more bikes I made, and I made I don't know if you've seen my single speed full sus bike, the Beady Little Eye. I made a version of that, an early prototype of that, and that was brilliant. I love riding that bike. And then I made a sort of early version of like the enduro bike, and I started racing it. And it seemed to work really well. And I started thinking, oh, okay, I'm not just knocking something together here. It's actually working.
Yeah, it's performing.
And performing. Not that I'm the world's greatest rider, so I wasn't winning any races on it, but it was riding as well, if not better, than all the bikes I'd had previously. So I started thinking, okay, there's something going on here.
Yeah.
So I contacted Dirt Magazine. So Dirt Magazine, I don't know if you're probably aware of it over there. It's no longer what it used to be, but it was the big kind of downhill magazine. It was, everybody knew Dirt Magazine.
Yeah, I know that.
Steve Jones, the sort of chief tester there, I contacted him and said, did he want to have a go on one of my bikes? So, and my thinking behind it was kind of as a home builder, can a home builder build a bike that's equivalent to what all the big brands are doing, what everyone out there is doing?
Now, how long ago was this? How long ago was it you contacted Dirt and had them ride something?
Do you know? I can't remember. It's 4 or 5 years ago. I need to. I should have a copy of it here. There's a UK magazine called Sender Mag, sort of a small glossy mag, and I did an article with him, and he actually got all the dates out of me, but I've forgotten now. But let's say 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah,
not very good with dates.
Enough. I was just curious how long ago it was. That's good.
So he rode one of my early kind of enduro bikes and loved it. And there was a few issues with the early one. It was a little bit flexy. Like it had a crappy shock on it. I had no expensive parts on it, but it seemed to work. And he's like, okay, there's something going on here. And then I built a few more prototypes. They rode them. And then because I was getting a bit of exposure in dirt, I started getting some orders coming through.
Great.
So sort of 1-2 orders. And the first few bikes I sold off dirt cheap, so £1,000, which, for a full sus bike is pretty cheap. And custom sized. And my first few customers were pretty happy. They were all good. One of my first customers was a bike shop owner in America. Oh, sorry, not in America. That's you. In Switzerland, who said he did 20 hours of riding a week. So 20 hours on the bike a week. And nice. He had one of my bikes for a year. And it didn't break. He had no issues with bearings. It kept going, and he loved it. So that was a really good sort of first test that
hell yeah,
it had longevity. It wasn't just a bike that was going to fall apart. And I think he's a pretty rapid rider. So, it's just from that, it's just kind of progressed and more sales. One of the key things that happened was I made a 29er prototype, and I went and rode it with one of my mates, and I absolutely loved it. He did a few runs on it, absolutely loved it. I went to see Steve Jones to show him one of my 27-inch bikes that I'd had painted in a lovely custom paint job with birds flying it over, and that was me attempting to sort of show something really beautiful and what I could achieve. But in my van at the same time was the 29er prototype, which was unpainted. It was sort of rusting a bit. It had only been ridden a handful of times. And he wasn't interested in my beautiful painted bike, which I was a bit upset about. He just wanted to ride the 29er. So we went and did a did a loop of the local woods on the 29, and he absolutely loved it. And he wouldn't let me take it away. He took it off me and started riding it. And he did some timed runs on it. And I think he published the results of those time runs. And my 29er prototype, which, it was a prototype. I hadn't really thought too much about geometry, too much about how it was going to work, but it was 4 or 5 seconds quicker on a 2-minute track than some top end 10,000 pound carbon bikes that he was testing at the moment.
Wow.
So, and he published that on his Instagram account, and overnight I had about 20 orders for that bike.
That's awesome. That's gotta feel good too. It's kind of like, you're building something because you wanted to build it. It's not like it's a job, and then all of a sudden people are recognizing, hey, this works. I want one of those.
Yeah, and it was, sort of validation. I'd always thought they rode well, but you anything you do is always good. It's like everyone's kids are great, aren't they? And everyone's great at painting. Everything you do yourself is great. So to have a bit of validation that somebody else thought it was good was fantastic.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that before you got into the bikes, you were an aerospace engineer. What were you doing in aerospace engineering?
So I was a stress engineer. So really my job was to analyze aircraft components and do calculations to decide how strong they were. So a lot of hand calculations, but also a bit of finite element. So people know finite element as the coloured pictures that show you where the high stresses are. Mm-hmm. But I was always a bit of a bit more traditional and preferred hand calculations. FE has got a tendency to be good for marketing and good for presentations where you can show things are good, but it doesn't necessarily give you the right answer. So
sure, that's got to come in handy. That has to translate pretty well to especially downhill mountain biking. There's a lot of stress that goes into the frames and what you're building.
The stress goes into everything. So not just downhill, as any old bike. So yeah, and it's So I've got a very good head for understanding how materials behave, how structures behave. It's always been pretty intuitive to me to understand that. So in aerospace, I did a lot of aluminium stuff, but I very early on I got involved in carbon fiber. I was involved in an aircraft called A400M, which is a military transporter, and it was the first carbon aircraft that Airbus built. So I was involved at an early stage of that when I was quite young, but developing analysis methods, thinking about materials, thinking about the design of the carbon structure. Cool. And then from that, I followed in. I got more and more into carbon fiber research. I worked for a company that was dedicated to doing research projects for Airbus. And then eventually I got a post at a company called GKN, big company called GKN, running I was tech lead for their carbon fiber research department. And that was a fantastic job. We were looking at new technologies, trying to come up with new designs, doing a lot of testing, really, really interesting stuff.
Yeah, it sounds fun. But so you did a lot of work in carbon fiber, but your bikes are steel, right?
Yeah, so I suppose I'm well aware that I've made a jump from carbon to steel, and I've perhaps played to the facts a little bit, but it's carbon is I don't know. I knew one chap who was a very senior engineer in Airbus, and he wrote a little report which he hid on the Airbus server, which basically showed it would be better to make aircraft out of aluminium than carbon fiber. There's so many issues associated with carbon fiber to do with quality, to do with maintaining that quality, improving that quality, that it kills the benefits that you can potentially get from it. So aerospace is very safety driven, so you have to prove everything is safe. And as soon as you have to start proving stuff is safe, you have to add in contingency, which adds in weight, which adds in cost. So aluminium we know very well. And I don't know, as time goes on, you kind of realize you can make a flat sheet out of carbon fiber really well. But as soon as you try and put carbon fiber into a complex shape, all the beautiful layers of carbon fiber will end up doing weird things, and that kills strength, that kills the confidence you have in that structure.
What are the weird things? What
So
happens with carbon when it's in like fancy frames or when it's in odd shapes?
imagine it's I suppose a good way of thinking about it is the pages of a book. So pages of a book all sit nicely on top of each other. As soon as you try and bend the pages all move apart, don't they? So if
Yeah,
you take a
separately.
magazine, yeah, and they separate, yeah, and as soon as they separate, that breaks the strength between the layers, and you lose the bending strength of the material. So you can get around it a little bit by using different types of resin, but it's that sort of structure or the quality of the structures you see in push bikes, you would never see on a you'd never see on an aircraft. It wouldn't even get anywhere near passing quality. So I think
Right.
I'll be careful what I say here. There was a large American brand who posted up a cross section of one of their bikes, and they posted it up as kind of they were very proud of what they'd achieved, and it was absolutely shocking. The quality of the layout was absolutely shocking. It was, the fibers were all over the place. There was sort of like loops in the carbon fiber. There was resin rich areas, and I it's probably strong enough for mountain bikes. It's sufficient for mountain bikes. Mountain bikes, compared to an aircraft, don't have to have the same safety requirements. They don't have the same strength requirements.
Well,
So
no, you're
it's
not
good
landing.
enough.
You're not landing from 30,000 feet. You're landing from 5 or 10.
Yeah, and you haven't got 500 people on board. Is the main thing.
No, no.
You got one person. If it cracks, it's unlikely someone's going to die. If an aeroplane wing falls off, that's 500 dead people, and that's a
Yeah,
massive
not
news
good.
story. I think carbon fiber in bikes, I think, is good enough. But when you've seen what they try and achieve in aerospace, it's just not the same quality. So I know, you just look at it and think that's crap. I don't want to make bikes out of things like that.
Yeah,
So
so having your experience in aerospace, in which takes carbon fiber to another level than it's usually worked on, I guess, in bikes and other products, it makes you feel
yeah,
like you can't get the most out of the material. So why bother? Work with something that you
yeah,
can
and
maximize.
what are the requirements for a mountain bike? I personally, I don't think weight is that important. I'll come on to that later on, but I don't think weight is that important for something. Unless you're a 8 stone, top level cross country racer, I don't think
Hmm.
it matters. Yeah, it doesn't matter for the rest of us. So if we get rid of weight, then what's damage tolerance is really important, isn't it? You drop mountain bikes, you throw them all over the place. Like, they're a thing that's used and abused. So
Yeah.
it's important that it hangs together. So a dent in a steel bike is no issue at all. If you hit the top tube of a carbon bike, there's something called BVID, which is okay, it's got different terms in different industries, but in aerospace it was BVID, which was barely visible impact damage, which means you have a damage on the outside of something, and it might be a tiny little scratch, but inside all of the carbon fiber is delaminated.
Hmm.
It's all broken inside, but you can only see the damage on the outside. And what happens is when you whack it, all the energy just moves through the matrix of the carbon fiber and causes it to delaminate inside, but it looks fine on the outside. So
Hmm.
if you've got that on a bike, you might have a little scratch on the outside, and it's all knackered on the inside.
Yeah.
And you don't want that. That's not not ideal, really.
So, do you think that that big American anonymous brand that posted some of their a cross section of their carbon fiber, do you think that they didn't know the errors, or they didn't understand that it was bad, or do you think that they're hoping that the general populace doesn't know the difference?
They can't have known, can they? If they posted it, they can't have known. So,
God, you hope not.
and but they've done their testing. I've got to be careful that it is good enough. Like, carbon bikes are good. They don't break very rarely, but very often. They are strong enough. It's just that when you've seen better, you feel it doesn't look quite right.
Yeah, I get it. And it's just if you're a craftsman and you're in there actually building the things yourself, and you to get to do what you do, you probably have a bit of a perfectionist streak in yourself somewhere. And then if you can't get the materials to be the where you want them to be, then use the materials that you can get there, right? I mean, it
Yeah,
makes you probably
yeah,
makes you more comfortable with the bikes you're going to be shipping out.
yeah, totally, totally. I got one other thing I've been thinking about carbon fiber bikes recently. I went out to Taiwan end of last year to look at I'm getting some of my frames now are going to be made in Taiwan, and I went out to visit the factory and see what it was like out there. And the factory was amazing. Uh, it was kind of like my workshop, but on a much bigger scale. So there were lots of skilled welders. There were skilled people using all the machinery operators, the CNC machine operators, people forming all the materials. It was a workshop, a factory full of skilled people.
Mm-hmm.
One thing with carbon fiber manufacture is once you've paid the money for the mold, it's relatively unskilled labour to fill that mold with carbon fibre. And
Mm.
then you squeeze in the resin, you cook it, you just need somebody who's relatively skilled to control the cure, and then it comes out, and again you need unskilled labour to tidy it up and assemble it. So there's if I'm running a great big company, a risk is always having skilled staff. If you can replace your skilled staff with unskilled staff, then that removes a risk in your management of your company. So I think there's a little bit of pushing carbon fiber because it allows you to have unskilled staff. It allows you to, knock down the wages of you've got big upfront costs for the tooling and the autoclaves and stuff, but the actual manufacture of the frame becomes unskilled, which as a
Yeah,
business
I've
point of
read
view
that
is
before too. That once you've got the setup done, and once you're ready to mass produce, the carbon fiber becomes cheaper than working in
yeah,
aluminum or steel because of
yeah,
that fact.
yeah. And
Yeah.
aluminium's as skilled as steel, really. It's the same idea.
It sounds to me like it's not the material that you're against. It's more the current capabilities with it. Like in 10
Yeah,
years, if carbon fiber and the production of it can be very well perfected or done, to a much higher degree, it sounds like you'd look at it then. It's just that right now it doesn't meet your own specs.
um, yeah, maybe. I don't know. I still think there's some other things that steel gives you. It gives you the damage tolerance. I like the aesthetics of it. I've coming from an engineering background. I've always liked that form follows function. If it performs properly and the structure's good, then it looks good. Whereas a lot of bikes are, I think, are first of all designed by a product designer, and then the
Hmm.
engineer comes in afterwards. So that's the wrong way around. I think you have the engineer designs it, and then the product designer comes in and tweaks it for aesthetics. But I think using steel, where you're limited to, you can't hydroform steel particularly easily. You can't machine parts. So it's always going to be simple. So you've got
Right.
to apply some thinking. You've got to try and make it elegant with those simple forms to get a good design out of it. And I like that. It's more of a challenge than just starting with a CAD box and drawing the shape you want, and then sort of shoehorning in the engineering and the materials and the
Yeah, it does make for some sexy bikes, but at the same time, I agree on. I like things that are simple because simple usually doesn't break, or if it does break, you can
yeah,
fix it. Simple is manageable, and it usually
yeah,
some of the bikes today they're very not simple. They look
no.
amazing and they ride amazing, but they're not the kind of bike that you can do your own tune up. They're more than
Yeah.
people can work on.
I think simplicity is now complexity is quite often is because you've used a sticking plaster to solve a problem. So if you've got a problem, there's two ways of solving it. You either go back to the start and get rid of the problem at the start, or you apply a sticking plaster, you add something to it to get rid of that problem. And to me, anytime you've got something that's complex, what the designer's done is, oh, we've got a problem, let's fix it by this, rather than saying, let's go back to the start, let's think about what the real problem is. Let's try and get our basic design to solve that problem rather than adding something in. Does that
So
make
so
sense?
when you go ahead. What do you do to keep your bike simple?
Um, so they're single pivot. They've got a linear suspension curve. They're it's basically straight lines, straight tubes. I've tried to minimise the amount of material at the difficult interfaces, so the main pivot and around the bottom bracket where space issues. I've tried to simplify that region around there and get it as minimal as possible. Um, there's no. The other thing is in ride dynamics, the anti-squat, anti-rise behaviour, which is essentially how the suspension is impacted by accelerations and decelerations and body movements. I've tried to keep that as simple as possible. So as you move around on the bike, the main pivot is positioned so you have the minimum impact on the suspension. Whereas some people say, oh, you want it so that when you pedal, it tucks the rear tyre in to give you grip from the rear tyre. Yeah, maybe, but I think just keep it neutral, keep it simple, and then it's easier for people's heads to understand, and it makes it easier to ride, and then makes it better.
Well, that's kind of the arms race in bikes right now is enduro, right? There's like three main classes between trail, enduro, and downhill. But the real race is to make a bike that will crush the downhill and also the uphill that will pedal, without the sag and really perform. And I mean, there's a lot of bikes out there that are pretty damn close. I mean, I've ridden some bikes that are enduro class bikes that charge downhill, but they pedal up the hill just fine. They perform awesome. So I think, but it still looks like that's the thing that the industry's trying to perfect is the all rounder.
Yeah. There is a little bit though of one thing I keep thinking, and I get sucked into this is kind of pedal up and then bomb down. But occasionally we go along, don't we? And I think we're forgetting bikes that go along. And I haven't got a bike that goes along at the moment. They're all my bikes are designed to pedal up a fire road nice, and then be really fast going downhill, which is what enduro is. But there's still, sometimes you do a cross country loop and you go along a slight incline or you go along a slight down, and we kind of forget that a little bit. But I'd like to build a bike to do that at some point.
I'd love to ride it because most of my riding is in the woods here in New England in America. So most of my rides are me and friends heading out into the woods on trails, rock gardens and just, but no fire roads, no lifts. So it's really heading out for a good 10-mile ride around the woods. So there's some uphills, there's some downhills. You got to earn the downhills by riding all the way up, though, and it's used mostly technical terrain, single track, and you pedal a lot. That's what you're doing the whole time. So for me, that's been I really my next bike. I want an enduro bike, but it's been hard for me to commit, and I want to, but it's been hard for me to commit because I'm still waiting for that perfection. Because I spend the majority of my riding. I'm at a bike park maybe twice a year. 3 times a year, but most of my time is just in the woods. So I'm still a little hesitant to get rid of some of that pedal power.
A lot of it comes from wheels, though. I think most bikes are pretty good these days, but you've always compromised on wheels. So if you going uphill, you need a lightweight set of wheels. Going downhill, you want a heavier, stronger set of wheels.
Yep.
And the same with tires. It's always a compromise between wheel weight for going up, and then I think a bit of wheel weight actually helps going down. It tracks the bike better. It doesn't get knocked offline. But we're almost at the point where the frames are good enough. They all pedal pretty well. They all pedal pretty badly, but you want your cross-country wheels going up and your downhill wheels going down. But that's
right. There's a difference in the dig and the drag too of the tires. That can make a difference.
There we go. Variable size tires and weight tires. That's what we need. That's an interesting one.
So I thought it was interesting that the Murmur. I'm looking at it right now, by the way. The lines are super clean. And it's a 2.9er, which is interesting because maybe you're seeing something else. But in Europe, aren't they slower to adopt the 2.9er? The 27.5 is still the most popular.
No, not really. No, the past couple of years, there's a lot of 29ers around. I think it's the past couple of years it's really changed. I've got a race team. I've got 4 riders racing for me. 3 of them are on 29ers. And then Phil actually rode one of my 29ers for the first time last weekend and got his best result ever. So, and he's not I kind of think there's a little bit of, it's a size thing. If you're I think 5'6" is kind of the cutoff. If you're 5'6", then you're probably 27 and a half. If you're any taller, your 29er suits you better. So there's a
Yeah.
little bit
I,
of it's an ergonomic thing.
I like it too. I ride a 2.9er. I like them a lot. I love the jump. It's interesting that you're not seeing that hesitancy. And I talked to a couple other
No,
people
not at all.
from different companies, and they are. It'd be interesting to see it shake out. The 2.9ers are super popular here in America.
Yeah. I've spent a lot of time thinking about why they work as well. Do you want a quick go through that? Because that's interesting. Another bit of tech about 29ers. So there's a lot of talk about, well, I'll do tyre contact patch first. Everyone says, oh, 29ers have got a bigger contact patch. But absolute bollocks. Am I allowed to say bollocks? I'll say it twice now, but there you go. The contact patch is entirely proportional to the pressure in the tyres. So it's the pressure that supports the rider's weight. So a 29-inch, 2.8-inch tyre with 20 PSI has got exactly the same contact patch as a 1.8-inch, 26-inch tyre. So contact patch is nonsense. It is totally down to pressure. So forget about that. People talk about rollover. They say the 29-inch wheels have got more rollover. I've done a few diagrams before, and I've looked at if you hit a 50 millimeter bump, so a 2-inch bump, and you look at the angle it hits the tyre at. If you do that with a 26-inch wheel, a 29-inch wheel, with 27.5-inch wheel, the angle, the forces that it put into the tyre, there's about a degree difference. It's a tiny difference. So they don't really roll over. And anything bigger than half an inch, say 2 or 3 inches, isn't something you're going to roll over, is it? So there's very, very little difference between rollover. People say, oh, the 29ers accelerate slower. But they don't, because the tyre actually spins slower. So if it's 29 versus 27.5, it spins at that ratio slower because it's a bigger wheel. It's got a bigger circumference. So there's no difference in acceleration. There is a little bit of difference that the 29er is a bigger wheel overall. So it might add a pound, half a pound to your bike weight overall. But again, weight isn't that important, so that's pretty negligible. The only thing I've found that matters is, remember you used to get, what are they called? Things used to spin, the gyroscopes. You used to spin a gyroscope and it sort of, to spin it out of plane is really hard. So imagine you get your front wheel and you spin it really fast and you hold it at the axles. To move the wheel out of plane requires quite a bit of force. It's quite hard and it tends to pull itself straight. The inertia that's in that wheel is proportional to the radius squared. So if
That's
you
interesting.
a 29-inch is about 10%, 15% more inertia in it than a 27.5. So of all the numbers about 29-inch tyres, 29-inch wheels, that's the only number that I've found a significant difference in. And if you
Really
think about
interesting.
that, if you're bombing through a rock garden, the 29er, because it's got that extra inertia, it doesn't get knocked off line as easily. It doesn't get knocked out of the straight line direction. I think that is what people perceive as rollover. It's that it keeps tracking in a straight line. It doesn't get kicked out of line. And when you get an off-camber section, the 29er just seems to sit on off-camber so much better than the smaller wheels. And again, I think that's the same kind of behavior. It's the inertia. It's the off-axis inertia, which is the thing that changes. I might be
That's really
totally wrong,
interesting.
but that's my...
I've never heard anybody put it that way before. That's really interesting. I want to ask you though. You were mentioning on rollover that it doesn't have much difference on a half-inch or a 1-inch. What about on a 5-inch? What about on something that's 6, 7
yeah, it
inches,
does.
and like a log or a rock garden full of bigger boulders? What about does it roll over easier there?
But a 5-6 inch lump, you can't roll over, can you? You've got to move the bike over it. You've got to pull up over it. So yeah, it has a bit more. As the tyre gets bigger, or as the lump gets bigger, the effect becomes less. But I think you get to a 2-inch bump is realistically what you're going to hit at speed and hope to get over. Anything bigger than that, you're going to have to do something about it, aren't you? You're going to have to pull up.
Yeah, definitely. You're pulling up, but the tire's still coming over. It's like if you're going over a tree that fell down over the path, and it's small enough that you can get over it, but you're gonna definitely have to lift the front and back as you go. But the tire's going over it. I'm curious if the 29-inch wheels, do they make a difference at that point versus a 26? Or is that just
Maybe.
rider? You think that's just rider pulling the bike over it with muscle?
Yeah, I think that becomes a bunny hop, doesn't it? That becomes you're not just hanging on and hoping you're going to roll over it. You're jumping at that point. You're hopping over it. So I don't know. Yeah, maybe it does at that point. It's all very complicated, isn't it? That's the trouble.
Yeah,
It's massively
definitely.
complicated.
It's all way beyond my pay grade. But
Yeah,
it's really interesting because I've never heard that gyroscope example makes total sense.
yeah.
And I've never heard anyone mention that about the 29s before. That's really interesting.
I spent a bit of time thinking about 29ers, and I did a bit of, there's loads of information on the internet, and this question has been answered by about 1,000 times by millions of people, but it,
Well, you got to be
you know,
careful with that because you don't know whose
yeah,
answer, who it is that's
yeah,
giving you an answer, and any quality
yeah.
behind it.
But then you can do, I'm able to do sanity checks on all of those things. That's sort of, my skill set. I'm able to do that. So I'm pretty confident in what I've read, and that all the numbers I've done tie up with what people are saying. So
Interesting. And it really is. That's it's. I'm smiling ear to ear. It's just new stuff I didn't expect to learn today.
there you
Um,
go.
so I want to keep going and dig in because I want to get a better understanding. I know that throughout your website, and you've mentioned it to me, that silence is a big thing with your bikes. What do you mean by
Yeah.
silence?
Um, I think a lot of we've talked a lot about bike performance, but a lot of bike performance, well, 95% is the rider, isn't it? And I think quite often when you buy a new bike, even if the bike is worse than the old one, you ride better on the new one once you've got used to it because you're more confident in it, and it's shiny, so you think, yeah, I'm going to go faster.
Well, you
And
you paid for it too, so it better do better.
yeah, exactly, yeah. So I think silence is the same thing. If you ride a bike and it's rattly, you don't trust it, and it also it detracts from your ability to concentrate a little bit. Whereas if your bike is absolutely silent, and if you've ever ridden a silent bike, it is amazing. You just feel confident. There's nothing to track. All you can hear is the sound of the tires, and hopefully you've got a nice quiet free hub as well. And it just feels great. It feels solid. You feel confident. And I
Yeah,
think it was
I don't think I've
it
ever
was
heard
one
anything
thing that
silent.
it was one thing that Sam Hill always used to do. And I remember lots of features on his bikes, and they always said his bikes are silent. And he's quite quick, I think. So
How does it come to be? How do you make a bike silent? I mean, a lot of even the newer high end expensive bikes I've ridden, they don't have a lot of creaks or slapping, but they make a lot of noise. They're not quiet at all. And my bike,
I think.
after every season, mine starts to creak, and when it needs a tune up, and you got to pull the bottom bracket apart. When it's time, my bike makes a ton of noise.
Mm. So there's
Unfortunately.
partly if your bike is simple and there's less things to move, there's less things to go wrong. So if you've only got one pivot, then
Hmm.
it's not going to make a lot of, there's less to go wrong. That's going to start creaking and making noise. But
Hmm.
the size of the tubes is a big factor. The tubes act as a sound box. They cause the noises in the frame to be made louder. They cause them to vibrate inside the tube. So if you've got small diameter tubes, you just don't get that noise being generated. So the
No
small
kidding.
steel tubes just don't generate a lot of noise. Ride a steel hardtail, it's pretty quiet. Ride a great big, aluminium monocoque frame, and it makes a racket.
That's really interesting because that's one thing I noticed about your bikes is they don't follow the trend of like thicker tubes to make the thing look more aggressive, and
Mm.
the fact that that has an engineering reason behind it is fascinating. That's really interesting. So, and I get it. So it's kind of like a reverb chamber. You get bigger, you get
Yeah,
louder. Your bike's basically a speaker, and
yeah.
yours is dampening the noise.
But it's not damping the noise down, but it's not attenuating it as much as big tubes. It's just
That's really
smaller effects.
interesting.
So yeah.
That's interesting. What else do I need to know about your
Ah.
bikes and bikes in general?
So coming on from the small diameter tubes, compliance. So compliance is the opposite to stiffness. We everybody thinks they want a very stiff bike, and they think, oh, it's stiff. I'm going to pedal. I'm going to go fast because of stiffness. Yeah, maybe to a tiny degree, but okay, I'll cover the pedaling stiffness one first. Imagine if you really the amount of energy you get out from pedaling is a function of how hard you can push on the pedals.
Mm-hmm.
Because all the energy that you put into the pedals, the force you put into the pedals comes out the back wheel. We're not losing energy in heat. We're not losing energy in sound. So all the energy you put in comes out the back wheel. And there's quite a lot of evidence that reinforces that. What the problem is, if you've got a flexi crank, for example, you can't push as hard in the pedals. As you push on the pedal moves out the way, you don't get quite as much power down. If it twists sideways, you don't get as much power down. But the analogy I've been using is if you stamp on a foam block, you can't get that much energy, you can't get that much force into the foam block. If you stamp on a wooden floor, you can pretty much get as much power as you want out of your leg. You can push as hard as you possibly can.
Yeah.
If you stamp on a solid steel floor, you can probably only get as much force as you can out of the wooden floor. But the steel floor is a lot stiffer than the wooden floor. So all you need is something to be stiff enough that you can get in your pedaling forces. You don't need to make it stiffer and stiffer and stiffer and stiffer. You just need it to be stiff enough. So I think a steel frame with a pair of reasonable cranks on it is stiff enough that all of your pedaling energy will go forward and will go into forward motion. So therefore, you don't need to keep making bikes stiffer for pedaling reasons. It's stiff enough, and my bikes all pedal really well. I've got national enduro champion at the moment. I've got they're fast. They pedal well. They pedal fast.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So only needs to be stiff enough pedaling. So then we start thinking about stiffness for other reasons. So imagine you're going along in a straight line, and at the moment I've got £1,000 worth of Lyric fork on the front, and I've got like £1,000 worth of an EXT shock on the rear. So I've got 2 grand's worth of suspension taking bumps out vertically. Mm-hmm. If I go around a corner and I lean my bike over to 45 degrees, then only half of the bump forces are going through the suspension. The rest of the bump forces are bending the frame sideways. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So if my frame is really, really stiff laterally, if my frame is really, really stiff sideways, it can't conform to the bumps. It bounces off them. It chatters on the bumps. But if you've got a bit of give in your frame and it can move sideways, it starts sticking to the ground. It's got a bit of suspension sideways. So a really,
so
stiff
it's like a lateral flex in the frame.
Yeah. So a bit of lateral suspension. Ideally, you have a shock absorber acting sideways, and I should keep that quiet. That's a future idea. But so you need a bit of compliance in the frame. So one thing steel does, because steel you don't need those great big large diameter tubes for strength. So, an engineering thing here, a large diameter tube gives you better strength for a lower weight, and that's a very accepted thing. That's why everything has big fat tubes, fat tennis rackets, and lots of things are fat, because it's a good way to get a weight efficient design. Mm-hmm. But if you make a steel tube very, very large diameter, the wall thickness becomes so thin that it dents. It becomes like a tin can. So you have to have relatively small tubes, thick wall tubes, because that is the best. Well, you need it for denting, so they don't dent. But that small diameter is a lot more flexible than a great big large diameter, and the stiffness, the bending stiffness, is proportional to a squared term gain. So there's a big difference. Mm. And then again, if you look at the stays on my bike, it's got really thin stays, and they're strong enough. They're plenty strong enough because they're steel, but they've got give in them. They've got compliance in them because they're small diameter. So you could do it out of aluminium, but if you make an aluminium frame that small diameter, because the stresses are higher, it would fatigue. So you need the big diameter to stop it fatiguing and snapping. Mm-hmm. You could do the same with carbon fiber. You can make small diameter with carbon fiber, but it will actually become very difficult to manufacture because you couldn't get any kind of tool, any kind of mandrel inside the tool as you manufactured it. So carbon and aluminium lend themselves to big tubes. Steel lends itself to small tubes. Because it lends itself to small tubes, you get that compliance. So if you read any review...
And the quiet, right? So let me ask, I'm ignorant, but so the carbon fiber won't flex like steel, right? So that in those turns, you're not going to have that lateral flex that you'll get out of a steel bike. Is that right?
Yeah, unless you design it in somehow. Just the design of carbon bikes that are out there at the moment. A lot of the problem is that they are designing it to be stiff because they think that's a design requirement they want. I don't think it's a design requirement, but the carbon lends itself to a stiff bike more than a. You couldn't build a massively stiff steel bike. You could build a compliant carbon bike, but I don't. People aren't aiming at that at the moment. They might change their minds when they realise and it's kind of happening. But yeah.
Do you sell your bikes all over the world now? But you mentioned that you went from 0 to 2 to 20, all pretty fast. Where can people get your bikes now?
Um, I'm at the moment. I'm only selling. At the moment, I'm only producing UK-made, custom-sized frames, and for any of those, people need to contact me directly because they're custom-sized. I need to talk to the customer and get their what their requirements. But like I was saying earlier on, I went to Taiwan last year, and I'm getting a batch of my Murmur 29-inch frame made in Taiwan. They're actually pretty close to completion now, so they should get delivered or end of October or middle of October. I'm taking pre-sales on them. I'm actually looking for distributors at the moment on those. So I've got an Australian distributor. I've been contacted by a few around the world, but the Americans are proving tricky. It's really I don't know. You might be able to tell me, but my perception is the American market are quite conservative, and something new and different doesn't get picked up quite so easily. But maybe not.
No, I don't think that's the case at all. I think what it
Okay.
is I think it's people get their information differently here. This is what I've picked up from talking to European and mountain bike companies from different countries, and not just mountain bike because we work in adventure sports. So even in
Yeah.
snowboarding and other things, I think the audience learns about things differently.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
that like in Europe, the buy direct model and direct consumer sales and all that stuff is a lot more popular than it is
Yeah.
here. And
Yeah.
so the bike shops have a stronger foothold here, and it's because of a culture thing where here the bike shops are really part of the local riding fabric. They're involved in trail building and maintenance and running rides, and it's a very hands-on type of relationship where, and you correct me if I'm wrong, this is just what I've heard, that
No. No.
it's not the same over there. So
Yeah.
like I almost never talk about us, and but this kind of leads well into us. So sorry to bore everybody with some marketing, but there's
No,
a
that's good.
different way. There's a different way to educate the American consumer so that they're even aware that it's there. If you just leave it up to hopefully they find out about me, it's not going to happen, right? Because
Okay.
bike shops carry 3, 4 brands max. There's no bike shop in the
Yeah.
world that
Yeah.
can carry all the brands that exist nowadays. So no one's going to happen across a Starling or even a Transition or a YT, even bigger brands. You're not going to happen across them because your local store is going to have Specialized, Trek, Cannondale, maybe Santa
Okay.
Cruz. So, but what you do is you have talking with your friends, and then you have B, when you know you need a new bike and you're sitting on your couch and your kids are running around and you're just researching, you're Googling for like
Mm.
what kind of bikes are out there. I've heard of enduro and trail, like what's out there, and you start to just sort of put your questions out to the universe, to the great googly moogly. And that is where brands are making a difference because you can be the answer. You can be those results, and you can start to filter into people's lives through content and through
Yeah.
um, through value based marketing, where you're helping them answer a question of what kind of bike is right for them or how to tune their bike up for spring, or instead of a sales message. And that is how the American consumer is getting information, is
Okay.
through those methods. So that I
Yeah.
think
Okay.
is that and bike shops. But I would encourage you to work with distributors or bike shops. I don't know that side of the industry well enough to even comment. But I don't think Starling's ever going to be like the mainstay. Not ever, but for a while, you're not going to be able to replace Specialized in the local
No.
stores. So there's got to be a different way to get Americans to even
Yeah.
know that you've got these bikes and that you're doing some different work. That's interesting.
Yeah, I don't even want to replace Specialized. I'm happy selling a few, and my aim is to pay my mortgage and feed my kids and pay for my retirement and design bikes, do engineering. I'm an engineer. I'm not a salesman, so it's I'm not that fussed about selling millions and millions. No need for that.
Sure. Yeah, and you don't need
No
to
need.
sell millions and millions to pay your mortgage. Millions and millions can come with a whole new headache. I think
Yeah,
it's an interesting conversation we have with a lot of the smaller or the niche brands. Yet you don't want to be like nobody. Um, not nobody. It's unfair, but most companies say they don't want to be specialized or they don't want to be Burton. They don't want to be the big guy because
yeah,
that comes with more corporate mantra and mentality. Not that there's anything wrong with Specialized or Burton. They make dynamite products. They have great R&D. Like there's nothing bad about
yeah,
them, but the little guy doesn't want to be the big guy. They want to be the nimble, quick thinking little guy. But one of the questions or the things that I always discuss with folks is there's a big difference between a company that's selling 100 bikes, 200 bikes, 2,000 bikes, 20,000 bikes, and $1 billion corporation that's selling,
yeah,
who knows how many bikes. And there's a lot of ground in the middle to get more
yeah,
people aware of your bikes, to get more people on your bikes without without becoming that giant or that juggernaut.
yeah,
There's a lot of room in the middle for people to get new bikes and
yeah.
understand that there's options out there.
I think one of the benefits of staying small is you're not taking that big a market share, so it's easier. As soon as if you try and be big and you want to be a big bit of the market share, then you've got a challenge, haven't you? It's just to be a niche product. There's always a market for niche products. It's just getting it, just finding the right people, I suppose, isn't it? And
Well, I think the big brands you're getting into gambling more than you are to
yeah,
just trying to succeed, right? Because if you're specialized, if you're Burton, and you've got every store from globally. I mean, really, it's not like there's a market they're not in. So you have to make a lot of products, and you don't really know
yeah,
how many you're going to sell, and that ends up with the closeout deals and the sales, and a lot of the niche brands want to stay clear of that at all, and they'd rather sell out,
yeah,
have a year of growth, right? But they don't want to have growth they can't plan or can't sustain, so that they can sell out, not discount their products, keep that niche mentality, and next year maybe they make an extra 500 bikes or extra 1,000 bikes depending on where you are in your growth. Or it doesn't have to be bikes either, snowboard, whatever. The smaller company,
yeah,
they try to grow through that sustained quality, I guess, as opposed to Specialized has to gamble. They've got a lot of people running
yeah,
the numbers, but it's still a gamble. How many bikes are we going to sell?
yeah. Yeah, I had to buy some stock. I had to buy some forks and shocks today, and it was like predicting that was a nightmare. Okay. I'm basically going to either be short or I'm going to end up with too many and have to sell them off cheap. It's tricky.
I can only imagine. I can only imagine. But at least at least I'm figuring, how many bikes you ordered from the new
Yeah,
Taiwan shop. You know roughly what you made this year and what interest is like. So you're probably not going to be off by 100,000 forks, right?
no, no, no.
You're going to be off
Five
by a
or 10.
smaller amount.
Yeah,
Right, right.
yeah,
Which
yeah.
and ten's not going to change your paying for the
No,
mortgage.
no. I've got quite a big mortgage though. It's expensive in Bristol.
Yeah, yeah. It's expensive everywhere nowadays.
Yeah,
Where
yeah.
is it?
Unfortunately,
Where is
yeah.
it not?
No, yeah. Good point. Yeah.
What else? Is there anything else you want to get into today?
Um, No, I think that's good. I'll do a quick one on weights. Weights one of my current things I've been banging on about. Just quick. So
Yeah, no need to be quick. I'm
a
interested. I'm learning some new stuff today.
there you go. So imagine, I don't know, how much do you weigh? Say you weigh. We'll do it in metric. I know that might confuse you, but say you weigh 85 kilograms, which is what's that? I think like 13, 14 stone, and your bike weighs 15 kilograms, which is just over 30 pounds. So you've got to get, we'll do it in kilograms because the number's good. We've got to get 100 kilograms. It's a system weight. When you're going up the hill, what do you take up the hill? Do you take just the bike up the hill, or do you take the bike and you up the hill?
And your backpack.
And your backpack. So you've got to take 100 kilograms, say, to the top of the hill. If you took took one of my Mermans, for example, and say you took, I don't know, a top end, who makes light carbon bikes? Say Trek might be a light carbon bike, I don't know, but
Sure.
their equivalent bike might be 500 grams, half a kilo different in weight to one of my steel bikes. So half a kilo, although it means your bike weight goes from 31 pounds to 32 pounds, and they'll go, oh, it's a pound heavier. That's terrible. In terms of the weight you've got to get up the hill, the system you've got to get up the hill, that's only 0.5%, half a kilo and 100 kilos. So it's 0.5% different to get a pound heavier bike up the hill. So all the stuff to do with weight is nonsense. It's if you're okay, I said earlier, if you're a top level cross country racer and you weigh 8 stone and your bike weighs 20 pounds, it might start having 1% difference, 2% difference. But unless you're top level competition, that doesn't matter anyway. So,
Oh, I agree. Yeah, the only place it might matter is top level, best in the world competition,
yeah,
where you're talking about fractions of a second at the finish line. That's
but,
it. I agree. Unless you have some kind of innovation that's going to take 10 pounds off the bike, then I don't think it's that
no.
important.
So unfortunately, though, weight is a metric that marketing and the big companies use to show their bikes are getting better. So they will claim, oh, we've saved 200 grams off the frame, it's better. And everybody goes, oh, it's 200 grams lighter, it must be better. Bollocks, it doesn't matter, but because it's become a metric and because the German market are massively obsessed with weight. Every single German magazine you see, they print the weight of the component next to it. All the companies like Tune and I can't even think that are really, really obsessed with weight come out of there. So it's this metric, which doesn't matter, is really, really important to lots of people because marketing push it so hard. And I just think we're fools for believing it. And everybody knows when you go to a race, if you go to an enduro race, everybody's bikes weighs 33, 34 pounds. Because if they didn't weigh that and they didn't have the right tyres on them, they would just fall apart. So everybody who races knows that, but still marketing and big companies keep pushing it. And it's that whole idea that they've got this metric that they can keep pushing and everybody believes it. It just frustrates me that everybody knows, but nobody's willing to say, oh, I'm happy with my 33-pound bike. It's brilliant.
Well, I think that goes back too to what I was saying about people need the education because, like racing, I think there's more people that ride mountain bikes because they like riding bikes that could not tell you a single pro racer's name because they don't watch the sport. There's more of those than there are people who know who Aaron Gwynn is or who know that there's even a downhill World Cup. And I think that's where bikes in marketing miss their mark. They think that the X Games is their market, and I can tell you right now that I ride 3-4 days a week, and almost no one I ride with cares about any of that stuff. They'd rather be riding their bike in the woods. They're not involved with racing, and they don't know all the latest things about the gear. Nobody's sitting there talking about their bike being 33 1/3 pounds. They're not.
I bet if they went to a shop though, they would still buy the lighter thing over the heavier thing.
Sure, because the salesman would be telling them it's important to have the lighter weight bike.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway.
I think you're onto something there. Yeah. I agree.
I need to do what I need is I need a big budget from somebody to dispel all the myths of mountain biking. But yeah, eventually maybe that'll come from me. Maybe that's what I should aim to get enough budget for that. But
yeah, that you could be the mythbuster of mountain bikes.
Yeah, there are a few groups out there, I don't know, crazy university professors who do it for road biking, but they tend to be, I don't know, people in engineering and tend not to be very good at self-promotion and getting their ideas across. They sort of put them on some weird antiquated website and expect that everyone reads them rather than getting it out there.
True. Very true.
But I think, I can talk about lots of stuff for a long time, but I think that's probably enough, isn't it? Otherwise we'll start hurting people's heads.
Yeah, I mean we're right about an hour, so it's a great place to call it, and we can always do it again. I
Yeah.
had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
This is a good time. I'm always down for another episode of the podcast starring Joe McEwan. I think this was a lot of fun, and I'm glad we were able to put it together.
Brilliant. That's great, Adam. Thank you.